Welcome everybody. Before Dr. Jan comes out, I'd like to talk to you about nerve interference. Now these are 4 vertebrae of your spine. They're the bumps you feel when you run your hand down your back. Between each of the vertebrae is a disc, and these discs are the cushioning between the vertebrae, which are bones. From the brain down through the center of the spinal cord is the nerves that branch out to every tissue and every organ of your entire body. Now these 2 nerves are normal. All the messages of the brain are likely getting through where they need to go. This nerve here in the center is not normal. Not all the messages from the brain may be getting through. They may be getting cut off by this vertebrae, which is out of place. This is a very good example of nerve interference, and this is what we call the condition subluxation. Dr. Ormsby will have a question and answer period at the end, so think of things you need to ask. And please hold those questions till the end. If you have a cell phone with you, please make sure it's either silenced or turned off. And the doctor will be right out. Just a moment.
Hi, hello. Thank you so much for being here and coming back, and some of you got the front row.
We were forced.
That's funny. I'm gonna start out my talk with a story and it happened to me, and the reason I want to share it with you is because it was related to how well I thought I understood our body's ability to heal. And then I had this certain incident occur, and I had a whole new level of understanding. And I'm sure some of you have had something similar to this in your lives, either with yourself or others. But this was an interesting thing that happened to my mother. My parents had come out here for a vacation one summer, and we were going to have this big, huge barbecue on a Saturday night. And all of my friends were coming to this barbecue because they had known my parents over the years. So my mom was sitting on our front porch, and she was actually hulling strawberries. And she was knitting, and I was hulling strawberries. And I remember turning and waving to her through the picture window, and then turning back and going back to the strawberries. And it seemed like 2 seconds later, but in real time it was probably more like 4 or 5 minutes later, I hear all this shuffling going on at the front door, and then I hear my dad in this very worried voice say, "Janice, I think we have a problem here." And I come around the corner, and he's sliding my mother through the front door. He's got her under their arms and dragging her through the front door. And I said, "Is it your heart?" And she just goes like that. And I remember reaching for the phone at the same time. I'm asking her this. And any doctor will tell you in an emergency, it's not any big deal until it's your very own family, and then you'll go blind. And I did, because the 911 operator said, "What's your emergency?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." Like, I'm supposed to give her a diagnosis, And I said, "It's my mom." And she goes, "Oh, okay, I'll send an ambulance." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's what I'm calling you for, okay." So my dad and I helped my mom back into the room that they were staying in, and I remember taking her earrings off and her necklace and saying, "Whatever's going on, Mom, it's okay, we'll figure it out." Now, my mom speaks 5 different languages, but knows I speak only English. So she looks up at me, and in this very intense and pleading look, she starts trying to say something to me in Polish. And I'm going, "Mom, I don't understand you, and you should know I don't understand you." So this is like really getting weird. So she shifts gears and starts talking to me in German, which I don't know that either. And, and my dad's going, "Oy." And then shortly after that, I saw her face start to droop, and I went, "Oh, she's having a stroke." And she relayed later that she felt this pain shoot down her arms, she stood up and fell over, and that was it. She had nothing left on the right side of her body except for her ability to shrug her right shoulder. So the ambulance comes, they take my mom over to YRMC in Prescott. And I'm in the emergency room with her, and I'm thinking, okay, if she's got brain death, then I better make sure that the messages that are still communicating are not interfered with further down the line, because it's gonna cause more damage. So I have no tools on me. The exam tables in the emergency room are rather high. I'm like lurching on top of her. She's half paralyzed. I mean, it was like this real dog and pony show. But I was really trying hard to help my mom do whatever I could. So I leave the room to call my family to give them an update, and of course, wouldn't you know, that's when the emergency room physician comes in, does his evaluation, leaves, and then I come back. So my family, I said, well, what did the doctor say? And they're going, we don't really know. We don't understand at all. So I go through the whole emergency room, and I find the guy, and I introduce myself, and I go, hi, I'm Jan Ormsby, and my mom had a stroke. Can you tell me what's going on? And he says, and this is a quote, he goes, your mother has had a stroke, and what you see is what you get. And I remember thinking, that's awfully callous, but I'm sure I'm just overreacting, right? Until I thought about it later, what an awful thing to say. I mean, that was ridiculous. So they kept my mom in this hospital for like 3 days to make sure that she wasn't bleeding in her brain. And then at that time, when they released her, we had to send her to a rehab hospital in Phoenix, because they didn't have any here at the time. So 3 and 4 days a week, my dad and I drove back and forth to Phoenix to be with her while she was doing her rehab. And it was very interesting, because all my mom did was they had her prop up her arm, and they told her, concentrate on moving your fingers. And so like twice a day, for an hour each day, she simply sat there and stared at her fingers. And we would watch through the window in the door, I mean this little square window, and she'd be like this. And she'd get her tongue involved, and you could just see her so concentrating so hard. And then one day she says, look, and she goes like this little imperceptible movement. We were jumping for joy, because something was talking to those fingers again. And so when all of this, and at that time she was able to move her leg again, she was using like a 4-prong cane. And I went to the physical therapist who was in charge of my mom's care down there, and I said, so what can we expect? He says, well, your mom's never going to get her fine coordination back in her right hand. She's going to be able to use it like a big wand, so she'll be able to cradle boxes and things like that, but she's going to have to learn to write and do everything with her left hand. This one won't have the fine coordination. And I said, that's no big deal. So my mom was down there 9 weeks, and at the end of those 9 weeks, they said, good enough, let's ship her back to Wisconsin where she'll finish her rehab. So this whole entire time, I was adjusting my mom every single time I went down there. I took my tools, and I was working to keep her nervous system functioning as best it can. Now, my family is telling me, I'm asking them, how's mom doing? They're going, she's doing really great, you just won't believe it. And I'm thinking, well, I'm so happy she's figuring out how to work with this wand, right? So I'm gonna be this good doctor. So I go and get all these handicap catalogs, right? And I bought her like those spongy things that go around pencils, things like that, things that grab cans out of cupboards, stuff I'm gonna get my mom all set up, right? So I go home at Christmas. This is about 6 months after my mom had her stroke. And I walk in the front door, and my mom goes, hi. And I was shocked, because she had no sign of having had a stroke. And I was expecting to have a handicapped mother. They should have photographed me because they knew that I didn't really get it, because my mouth was hanging open. I was so shocked at how well she had recovered. And I remember thinking, I get it now. I get how capable we are. That you can take an area of your brain that is dead, and by simply requesting another area to take over, it does. It taps into those nerve tracts and starts doing the work for it. That is a miracle. And you guys have experienced miracles like that in your life, either within yourselves or obviously, like I said earlier, with others that where they were in, tragic car accidents and they recovered, or they had bad illnesses, bad cancers, and they got past them. Those are miracles. But what it really is a miracle of life. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. See, all these healing miracles that we see come from the life force. Life is what does the healing. Look at it like this. If I cut my finger, we know that under ordinary circumstances, we expect the finger to heal, correct? However, we're raised in a medically oriented society that teaches us it's the iodine and the mercurochrome and the stitches. That's what did the healing. Health food nuts are onto aloe vera juice or protein powder or a little zinc. And you know, little kids swear it's Band-Aids. Because nothing heals unless Band-Aids are involved. Well, if you think that's the case, then here's what you get to do. Go home tonight and take a small piece of steak out of your freezer and put a cut in it. And then put iodine and mercurochrome and stitches and Band-Aids and anything else you want. And I want you to bring it in to me when that thing finally heals. Because we know there's only one thing that's evident in my finger that we don't see in that steak. And the simple difference is that my finger is alive. Which happens to be this untangible, unscientific thing that we can't measure. We don't see it on an x-ray, but we know that it's there. If there's a car accident right out here in front of my office and two guys are involved, one is dead and one is hurt very badly, and they both got the exact same body chemistry, take a guess which one has the better chance of making it. Yeah, the guy that's alive is the only one that's got a shot. See, chiropractic is so simple that even chiropractors can explain it, so nothing's gonna get complicated here tonight. Consider this, guys. No pills, no potions, no lotions of any kind have ever cured anybody of anything. And no medical doctors have cured anybody of anything. No doctors of any kind have cured anybody of anything ever. Because the only thing that is capable of healing is life. And life is the very same miracle that takes things like peanut butter sandwiches and it turns them into eyeball tissue, or it takes Jack in the Box hamburgers and it turns them into muscle. And if you know what go in Jack in the Box hamburgers, we're kind of lucky we're turning them into anything at all. But food is what equates with tissue. So the dead stuff that I ate yesterday, that's what's walking and talking here today. But see, you do this all the time. So what happens is you start taking it all for granted. You don't even think about it anymore. So life is what equates with healing. If I can hope to get some life into the cut in my finger, I can hope that it'll heal. If I can hope to get some life into my low back, or my legs, or my kidney, or my bladder, my lungs, wherever it is I happen to be having a problem, I can hope for healing. We know, though, that for the past 5,000 years, medicine, as a profession, has been very busy treating symptoms. So if the solution is treat symptoms, how come we live in such a sick world? If they've had 5,000 years to orient this and get this all figured out, why are we living in such a sick world? Because it's a failing system. Sickness and disease equate with not a loss of pills or anything like that. It equates with a diminished life. So if there's a part of you that isn't working at 100%, we're gonna call it sick and diseased. But I'll tell you one thing, your body won't respond differently based on what you call your problem. And man, we love going to the doctor's offices and getting a diagnosis so that we know what to do. Well, I can make you guys somewhat of a diagnostician in like 30 seconds to show you how uncomplicated the process of diagnosis can often be. There's an ending out called itis, I-T-I-S. It stands for inflammation of whatever word you stick it on the end of. And everybody knows what inflammation is, right? Redness, heat, swelling, okay. Well, look at all the things that I can diagnose knowing one ending. And believe me, there are bunches of these endings. So see how many of these sound familiar. There's otitis, conjunctivitis, rhinitis, tonsillitis, laryngitis, pharyngitis, bronchitis, gastritis, colitis. And all I did was I named the part, and then I said inflammation of that part. Isn't that complicated? Don't you think that takes 7 years of college to get really good at that? You know, we'll get a little old lady, she goes into the doctor's office and she says, "Doctor, my joints, they're red and they're so inflamed. What do I have?" And he says, "Well, let's run some tests and see what we can find out." So she goes back in 3 days later and he says to her, "You have arthritis." Do you know what arthro means? Joints. So she goes in and says, "I've got these red and inflamed joints." And he says, "Yeah, you have red and inflamed joints." And this is silly, but I tell you what, it goes on all the time. It goes on all the time. We were reading an article in a medical journal, JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association. JAMA is one of the more peer-reviewed journals that medical doctors read, simply because things that are new in medicine tend to come out in JAMA. They were reading an article, this was published in their magazine 1 month, so this is what medical doctors were reading. The article stated this: if you let a patient talk long enough, they'll diagnose themselves. And you know what, if you let them talk longer, they'll tell you how to fix it. So here's my point. Your body only knows how to do one thing. which is why it is so good at it, and that one thing is to go back to normal. That's all your body struggles to do every second of your life, is to keep you functioning normal. The catch is, and there's always a catch, you can't interfere with its ability to get back to that normal. So let me give you some classic examples of homeostasis at work. If you get in a room and the room is too hot, what does your body do automatically?
Respond.
Yeah, because you gotta cool down. It knows it's not gonna, it can't work at that high temperature. So if you get too cold, what does your body do to bring that core temperature up?
Shiver.
You'll shiver, exactly. Now, if you're in college and you drink too much alcohol, what does your body do? It says, out, in the bushes, right? Out it comes. Because your body's driving toward homeostasis. But again, you can't interfere with it doing that. Now, a healthy life is organized. You're not just a bag of bones and a hank of hair. It's a lot more complicated than that. It takes excellent communication for you to walk, to talk, to sit in the chairs like you're doing right now. You have no idea how much communication is going on between your brain and the seat of your pants that's holding you in those chairs. Fortunately, our bodies are designed to work without our educated minds. And the reason that I say fortunately is because we are these educated idiots who know we need 14 things from the grocery store, so very cleverly, we put them on a list. But what happens when you get to the grocery store? You forget the list. Oh yeah, I want to rely on that to run my body. I want to go home tonight and say, well, it's 11 o'clock, I need to get up at 6. So I gotta make sure my heart beats 52 times a minute, and let's see, I'm breathing 50 times, and let's see, there's 60 minutes in an hour. You forget one thing and you'll wake up dead. I know I certainly wouldn't be here. It is a super intelligent action that does run our bodies. Now, just to clarify, it is not chemical reactions. And the reason that I have to clarify this is because they teach this in the local high schools in biology class, because I've asked the kids, that life began when the amino acids and enzymes got together and they gelled in the mud. That's how life started. Now, I tell those kids, you go straight back, ask the biology teacher how the mud got so smart that it knew to stack itself this high without spilling over. Or, how did I get holes in my head the appropriate size for my eyeballs so that when I lean forward, my eyeballs don't fall out? How does the mud know this? How could you, it is a super intelligent action that runs your body. How could you think there wasn't some kind of intelligence behind all this anyway? So in chiropractic, we will divide intelligence into two areas. One is the one you're familiar with, educated, the good old reading, writing, arithmetic. Now there's this other intelligence that you may or may not know. It's called innate intelligence or inborn intelligence, the God within. Let me talk about educated first so you kind of see its limitations. That's reading, writing, arithmetic. There was a magazine out called Scientific American. It had an article in it one month that said if you could take all of the knowledge that is available to us in this universe, but we are going to lay it from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Those are our parameters. What educated man already knows of that knowledge will amount to the size of a grain of sand. Compared to everything that's available, that's all we know of it. Now, I'm all for education. I think if we're smart, you better know everything that's in the one grain of sand as we can. But I think that if education teaches us anything, it should teach us one very simple and very honest concept. We don't know. We actually just don't have an answer. I love it when the health food nuts would come in and say, you know, Dr. Ormsby, I'm kind of taking all the vitamins there are, so we're good. And I think you can't be. Because if you get a medical dictionary out and look up vitamin B, they'll even describe it as an undetermined number of vitamins that does such and such. So they don't have vitamin B figured out yet. We used to think, when I was a kid, you could take ascorbic acid or you could take vitamin C, and it really was considered doing the same thing. But now, with all this expanding technology, they've discovered better than 30 more compounds in vitamin C than ascorbic acid ever had in the first place. And in more years of research, they're going to discover all these other things. The difference is that your body knows what it's doing. It has this innate intelligence. Now, get this, guys. This intelligence is there when the sperm and the egg get together, and in one of the only times in nature 2 cells come together to form 1 cell. And then it is with this cell as it multiplies, divides, travels down the fallopian tube, finally it embeds in the uterus. Less than 280 days later and 40 quadrillion cells later, this beautifully functioning human being is born, as long as it hasn't been interfered with. So you think about that. From 1 cell, the nervous system, which forms first, differentiates out kidney cells in the shape of a kidney, doing kidney functions where the kidney belongs. But from that same 1 cell, you differentiate out brain cells in the shape of a brain, doing brain functions where the brain sits. That's amazing. We don't even know how it does that. Now, innate intelligence doesn't leap out of you as you're coming down the birth canal as if that's all it's supposed to do. We have this power within us right now. It is ready to repair, replace. It even creates new tissue, guys, and it'll do it with the same vigor that it did when it made you in the first place from 1 cell. You just can't interfere with it. Haven't you ever fallen down and taken like a golf ball sized chunk out of your shin? You know, and then like, you know, with no help on your part, before you know it, it's all filled in, it's all covered up, it's all good. How does it know to do that? How do your top teeth know to grow down? How do your bottom teeth know to grow up? How does it know that? Because you have an innate wisdom that is driving you toward normal. But we get in the way of it all the time. Innate intelligence is part of a more universal intelligence. There really is a harmony to how this is all supposed to be functioning, yet man, who's the most educated, we interfere with us reaching our potential more than any other living thing. I find that very interesting, and I think it's because we think. And I think thinking is a dangerous concept for most people. We do know it's a dangerous concept for politicians. It'd be all right if they stopped thinking once in a while, or maybe start. Now, our intelligence, isn't this tacky? Spelled wrong. So if all words spell wrong, this is not the one to do. Now, our intelligence resides up in and around our brain someplace. Assuming we're starting with 100%, that power has to get from here, down the spine, out the nerves, to every single organ, tissue, and cell in your body. Your nervous system is so extensive that if you took an acid bath that washed away your hair, the bones, the flesh, everything but your nervous system, I would still be able to recognize exactly who you are. Because you have approximately 32 feet of nerves in every cubic inch of your body. 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch. 32 feet of nerves. You are a huge electrical network. You will often hear me refer to this as your life. Because what happens to tooth when we cut the nerve leading to the tooth? It dies. There's nothing you can do. The tooth has no brain of its own. You cut off its power source, the tooth is going to turn black and die. Can you imagine if you had only 1 heart nerve and you simply stumble going off the curb and clamp down on that nerve? We would be dropping like flies. It would be that simple. The difference is that we can all live without a tooth, most of us do, but you can't live without a vital organ like a heart, lungs, liver, kidneys. So millions of nerves are feeding these vital organs. So now I'm going to tell you why it's still such a tragedy to interfere with nerves in the spinal level. And this is the crux of what chiropractic is all about. So if you learn nothing else, this next couple of minutes is where it's all at, okay? Let's say we interfere with 1 main heart nerve coming off your spinal cord, and unfortunately it's not hard to do because they exit the spine right in this area here, okay? So we do book work and paperwork and work on computers, so our head's bent down all the time. We lay on couches and we watch TV and bend our necks up for hours on end. And my all-time favorite, we pay a couple of bucks and we stick our little kids on the bumper cars at the fair. So they can have multiple whiplash injuries all in the name of fun. I am not kidding. The next time you get around any midway or any kind of, you know, where kids can play in those things, watch what their necks are doing when they hit each other or when they ride on little roller coasters. You're going to be shocked at what you see because you won't have any reason to look at it, but now you'll be going, oh my gosh, I should be standing at the exit of these rides and handing out my business card and saying, give this to your mother because you're going to start having headaches or upset stomachs here because they've mangled this area so bad. So here's how it works. Heart cells, very hard working. Therefore, they're replaced quickly. They have a lifespan of 3 to 4 months only, and then the body puts a fresh one down. But it puts fresh ones down based on the messages that it has that are traveling along these nerves. Well, now you've interfered with a nerve. You've interfered with the main nerve, which means the messages that are being carried by that nerve are weaker than the cells of the previous generation. See what's happening? So every 3 to 4 months, this interfered with nerve is putting in a crappier cell. And it's like a kid who's at the beach with a big barrel, and he plants the barrel in the sand, and he goes over to the water, and he gets just a teaspoonful, it's a wee bit, nothing much, goes in there, dumps in the barrel, goes back, gets more, and if nobody stops him and he's persistent enough, eventually one more teaspoonful of water is gonna go in that barrel. Well, the water's gonna spill over the sides. That's when people experience their symptoms, when it has broken down and built up enough. And every one of you has heard of something just like this. Uncle George is gonna go shovel his walk after a blizzard back in Ohio. He shovels halfway out to the mailbox and then drops dead of a heart attack. And the family says, I don't understand it, Uncle George wasn't sick a day in his life. But he can't go from 100% life to 100% death halfway to his mailbox. Uncle George has been having a problem for an awful long time. These things don't just happen. They're called silent killers for a reason, because they're building up inside your system, and then finally when your body can't handle it any longer, it'll kick out a symptom. 6 out of 10 people who die of a heart attack, do you know what their very first symptom actually is? This is a really shocking statistic. 6 out of 10 people who die of a heart attack, guess what their first symptom is?
Yeah.
Death. They have no warning. There's none. And all of you know of people who've done it, just keeled over. 6 out of 10. That's crazy. And they would have swore that they were healthy the day before. But because it's breaking down inside the system, the body has no way of knowing. Because what happens is once you put pressure on a nerve, the tissue begins to break down. When you get enough tissue breakdown, symptoms begin to develop. And that's when you become aware of them. Now, that's usually what will drive you into my office. So the last thing to show up is the first thing to go. So go. When I start adjusting you, the symptoms are the first thing that go away. But if you don't allow me to adjust you to correct all the damage that's led up to the symptom, you've used me as a terribly expensive aspirin. Most of the work that I will do on you is when you're feeling good. It's like going to the dentist and drilling out the cavity and never filling the tooth. You have to stick with it until it's completely corrected. Now, we need full power to function fully. I'm not saying we can be 100% of the time, because no one's batting 1,000, but you want to function as close to 100% as often as possible for one very simple reason, and this is simple. This is how your body's supposed to work. Going to the chiropractor was not something that was ever designed to fix someone's bad neck or kink in their low back. Chiropractic was developed because Hippocrates, 2,000 years ago, the father of modern medicine, said, look well to the spine for the cause and prevention of disease. We were designed to restore integrity to nervous systems so that bodies can function at the highest level, so that no matter what you're scrambling around with, whether it's an upset stomach or cancer, you want your body fighting to its best degree, and you can't do that if the nervous system is held back. My job is to allow it to function at its highest level. Now, quiz question for the evening. Guess what brings more people into my office than anything else? Yes, pain. But it's pain, numbness, all these symptoms. Let's clarify what a symptom is. Symptoms are only fire alarms. They are not the fire. Symptoms are only fire alarms. They are not the fire. Medicine has become the most highly advanced, most technological alarm treaters in the world. Because what medicine does is they will hear from you what your symptoms are, give you drugs which chemically irritate your system to start causing the opposite effect. So if your blood pressure is too high, well, we'll give you something to lower it. It's too low, well, we'll give you something to bring it up. Constipation, chocolate XX. Diarrhea, kaopectate. It's the opposite effect. Except the function of symptoms is to tell you on a conscious level, you got a problem here. Come look at it. We need some help. Your body's asking you to fix this problem. Something's missing. You know what we do with our symptoms? We cover them up. And we chug along. That's all, really. We just cover them up. So imagine if we're driving down the street, I'm the driver, you're the passenger, my oil light comes on, you look and say, well, hey, you got an oil light, and I go, I got it covered. And I grab an aerosol can of black spray paint out of my glove box, box and I squirt over the red light and I keep driving. What are you gonna think? Hey, this is insanity at its finest hour. How stupid. Because you know if I keep going, I'm gonna seize the engine, crack the block, and I'm gonna have further problems, bigger problems, certainly more expensive problems. Yet every time you take drugs which simply eliminate a symptom and you do nothing to solve the underlying cause behind that symptom, you did the same thing. Isn't that scary? It's crazy when you think about it. And so often we take better care of our cars than we do of our own bodies. If you wear out your body, where are you gonna go live? In your car? Because you took better care of it? You have choices. You can, if all you want is symptom relief, this isn't the place to come. Just go to that corner drugstore over there. They will give you something to relieve any symptom that you got. And I guarantee you it will be a whole lot cheaper over there than in my office. The difference is that I'm in the business of health. Total different world. Health has never been described as the absence of symptoms. Betty Ford was the first lady. Every year she'd go down and get her physical done, and every year they said, clean bill of health, she's all good. Then she came up with breast cancer. Latest research says a woman has to have cancer developing in her system 7 to 10 years before there's a discernible lump. Was she healthy? No. She just had no symptoms. Don't ever use symptoms as an indicator as to how well you're doing, ever, because they're one of the worst ones. Which is interesting, because sometimes I can adjust somebody, clear out all the interference, and they're still symptomatic, because they haven't been nerve interference free long enough for the body to put enough healthy cells down where it was unhealthy and start tipping the scales to where they're feeling better. So don't use symptoms as an indicator. Patients are cute, they'll say, well, I didn't think I had to come anymore, I was feeling good. After a week and you've had something for 10 years, don't cough wrong, because you're gonna be back in my office, we're gonna have to start this all over again. So stick with it. Now, on the physical level, there's 3 primary ways that life does get interfered with in our systems. The first way is trauma or injury. We hit windshields, bang our fingers with hammers. Life gets interfered with. That's a very simple one. The second way life gets interfered with very easily, toxins or poisons. For a long time now, us quack chiropractors and health food nuts have been saying, you're actually putting things into your food that sort of have nothing to do with food. Really, like the next time you're around a loaf of white bread, flip it over and read the ingredient label. It'll say, yeah, he goes, no, don't. Right, don't. It says calcium propionate. Calcium propionate is rat poison. And what they used to do is put this crap on the inside of the wheat silos so that the rat's going to get in to eat the wheat, but they discovered by accident that the bread that they processed from that wheat ended up having longer shelf lives. So they started adding it all the time as a preservative. And 3 pieces of white bread isn't going to kill you, because we'd all be dead, and they'd figure it out. But again, it's a cumulative effect, only this time it's toxic. And this is not news to people anymore. We are all fully aware that we are eating a lot of garbage. The United States is the most overweight, undernourished culture because we eat such terrible food. And the standard that you can apply to help yourself know if it's good or not is, can you pronounce what's in the ingredient list? If you can't pronounce it, probably not the best thing to be eating. Or at least you're gonna know it's not the best thing for you, okay? The last way life can be interfered with is the one I concern myself with most, because there's no one else that's gonna. And that's direct nerve interference. And all of you have experienced this. Have you ever gone to the movies and sat with your legs crossed, and then like an hour into the movie think, I'll get some popcorn, so you go to stand on the leg and it has fallen asleep, right? So you kind of buckle underneath it. And we laugh because we go, oh, my leg was falling asleep. Actually, it was not. Your leg was dying, because you were pressing on the artery, vein, and nerve behind this knee with your other kneecap. So your leg was not falling asleep, it was dying. And if you left it there long enough, you'd have got that tingling feeling to move it, right? Haven't you ever woken up in the middle of the night like this, and like there's somebody else's arm attached to your body? It wasn't a coincidence that you woke up. Your body woke you up to get you to move that arm, because otherwise you were cutting off all the circulation, you were gonna have problems. So you've all experienced this. Take this back to your spine. And now you have some idea of what's happening to the organs and tissues that are at the end of nerves that are getting interfered with. But you don't know what's happening. You don't even feel it, because only 7% of the nerves in our body register pain. The other 93% register malfunction. Thank goodness it's only 7%. But can you imagine? You could have terrible pressure on nerves that's, where your leg is falling asleep. You could have that on your liver and you would have no way of knowing it because one of the functions of the liver is not pain. It couldn't even tell you that was going on. That's scary. That's why you can't constantly try and figure out if your body is doing well based on its symptoms. You have to keep nerve interference out of the picture because your body will drive you to the best normal it can. It's the easiest way to do it. Now, life on the nerve must get to all tissues from the brain without interference. If not, disease is going to accumulate. We live in a world where we drive cars that are meant for showroom floors, and we sit in chairs that we shouldn't probably be sitting in, and we end up getting subluxations. Just like this. The good news, though, is your body is designed to self-adjust. You were born with everything you needed to function fully. Nobody ever had to teach a baby how to digest milk. You were born with the capacity to correct these things on your own. But it's the one time you bend over to pick up a box again that you don't stand up straight, or you sleep funny and your neck just doesn't seem to be right after that. Well, that's when you become subluxated and your body can't handle it any longer. And that's generally what will drive you into my office. So my job is simply to locate and remove nerve interference. I don't do it based on your symptoms. I don't come in and say, tell me how your shoulder's doing today so I know what to do with your shoulder. I come in, correct all the interference, and allow your body to drive back to normal because I don't know what your heart is doing. I don't know that your heart's working well. And the nerves that feed shoulders feed hearts. So sometimes, because the body prioritizes its work, it won't monkey with a shoulder if it's busy fixing a heart problem we're unaware of. And so the patient will say, it's not getting better, it's not getting better. Maybe not. Maybe because your heart is. We have no way of knowing. But never assume nothing is going on. This picture was taken from an autopsy from a guy who died of kidney failure. And this was the nerve that led to the kidney. You can see the difference in caliber compared to the one above and the one below. The University of Massachusetts did a study where they autopsied 139 people, found the organ that caused their death, traced its nerve supply back to the spinal column, and found that in 137 out of 139 people, it was the weakest nerve in the whole entire system. And the other two people, one was a segment above and the other was a segment below. How's that for a direct connection? Okay. It's a lot more far-reaching than people realize. You need power into your system, and the more you keep your body functioning with the power it needs, the better it works, the higher its resistance is. You'd be surprised at how much healthier your life can be. So whatever else you learn tonight, learn this. Don't wait for symptoms. They are the last thing to show up. Interference can be found long before tissue change ever takes place. If you're not getting adjusted, you're kind of like a guy who jumps off a 20-story building, and as he goes by each floor, he says, well, so far so good. So far so good. Yeah, you'll never hit you won't have a symptom until you hit the ground, but eventually you get there. Now, there's something else that all doctors know, most nurses know, but nobody will tell the patients, except I will. And this may seem strange on its face value, but give me a chance to explain it. What I want you to know is that bacteria and viruses invade sick cells only. They will not invade healthy cells. They can only invade cells that are sick. The reason this is important for you to understand is because the germ theory is what all of us have been raised to believe is how we get sick, which basically says don't go over to Sally's house because Sally's got a cold and then you're going to get the germs and then you're going to get sick, and cover your mouth when you cough because you're spreading your germs like what? You're not spreading them every time you exhale? I mean, come on, it's silly. It is not exposure to bacteria and viruses that gets us sick. It's our lack of resistance to them. We have so many viruses and bacteria in and out of our systems all day long by virtue of the air we breathe, the food we eat, the water we're drinking, and these viruses and bacteria get into our system and they stay outside the cells. Because if a cell is healthy, the membrane around that cell is impermeable. Nothing can get in there. But the minute a cell weakens, which is determined by its nerve flow, so you weaken the nerve, the cell wall weakens, these bacteria and viruses pass through that membrane and they get inside the cell. And you know what's inside the cell? Party time, food. And they start replicating, and before you know, I got that scratchy throat, I feel, my stomach. That's because they've invaded the cells. If all you had to do was be exposed to something. In order for you to get sick, who'd work in a hospital? Nobody. You wouldn't even walk in a hospital, let alone work in one. It has nothing to do with exposure, it has to do with resistance. And the strongest way to keep your resistance high is by making sure you don't have pressure on nerves, which is feeding that cell. Parents have told me, families have told me over the last 30 years, it is remarkable how their kids aren't sick like they used to be. How they do their taxes and realize that the year they started chiropractic care, they barely went to the doctor anymore. Whereas they were dragging the kid in there all the time for the sinuses and the ear infections and things like that. Now, speaking of which, if I had it my way, every newborn on the way home from the hospital would get an adjustment, because the majority of problems we often experience as adults starts on the day we were born, and we call it the original subluxation. These two pictures here were taken out of a book called Beck's obstetrical textbook. It teaches doctors how to deliver babies. Caption for this, normal birth process. So these pictures were copied by a chiropractor in Rhode Island, plaqued and stuck on the wall of his office. And one of his patients was the last official hangman of New York, who was retired when New York had done away with capital punishment. And the hangman looks at these pictures and says, what is that supposed to be a picture of? And the chiropractor says, they call it a normal birth process. And he says, well, that has to be a mistake, you know, because that's exactly the same angle that we try to get the neck with the noose in order to snap it during hanging. Because, you know, a good hanging doesn't choke the guy to death. It breaks the neck, crushes the brainstem, and they simply don't take another breath. They just don't inhale again. Superman Christopher Reeves had a hangman's fracture. The only reason that he survived after he broke his neck was because there was a doctor there who knew what to do and breathed for him. That was a hangman's fracture. The reason this is important for you to know is because there were 2 studies done on crib death, SIDS, Sudden Infant Death Syndrome, and the first one was done at the University of, I think it was Pennsylvania. They autopsied 8 babies who died of crib death and discovered that 7 of those 8 babies had severe neck injury that had resulted in the respiratory failure. The latest statistic has come out of the University of Colorado, Dr. Sue, S-U-H, 24 of 26 babies who die of crib death have badly injured necks. And what they've determined has happened is that as the baby comes down the birth canal, they will twist the head in one direction to bring out a forward shoulder. Then they rotate the head in the other direction to bring out a back shoulder. They often pull on this baby's head to get it out. And then they hand the baby to the mother and they say, now watch its neck. And aren't we nervous about that neck? We constantly grabbing a hold of the neck. Look what has happened. And here's what they figured out has happened. In a newborn, the bones in our spine are actually simply cartilaginous rings, which allows us to be born. And this area from here, from the base of the spine to the second vertebrae, is where our brain stem sits. This is where we breathe. So these little cartilaginous rings swing this way, they pull on the neck, and all that happens is these cartilaginous rings rake up against the brain stem, where we breathe from. And in doing so, it creates these tiny little blisters. Well, blisters swell. So once these blisters swell, and they continue to swell, and they push to the perimeter of the canal, which is now made smaller by the misalignment of these bones, where does the pressure go? It doesn't just stop, it squeezes in. And the mother walks in after putting a seemingly healthy baby down for a nap and finds that it has died. Now, in my career of doing this 30-some odd years, I used to work originally for a company that had offices here, Phoenix, California, and they had been in business since 1967. And we had numerous doctors on staff, and we had checked thousands of newborn babies in that career through to mine today. And do you know that we have never lost one child to crib death we had an opportunity to adjust shortly after birth? Now, adjusting a newborn is not like adjusting an adult. It's about the pressure you'd use to squeeze a ripe tomato. It's just like wiggling. And if they're sleeping, they actually don't even wake up. But let's say the area is not so injured that it causes crib death. Thank goodness. That same area where those nerves exit are the big areas for headaches, sinuses, eyes, ears. Guess what's the number one thing I take care of in little kids? Ear infections. Number one diagnosis in a pediatrician's office is otitis media, ear infections. Number one solution, antibiotics. Since 1982, pediatricians have known that antibiotics do not resolve ear infections, but increase the likelihood of another infection by 66%. Don't give them antibiotics. Don't give them. And kids come to see me. I've had kids on prophylactic antibiotics. You know what that means? They take them every single day. So these kids come in, they have no bacteria left in their stomachs to digest food. Their stools are tarry, their stomachs are gassy all the time, their mouths are full of thrush, they're screaming constantly. It's horrendous. It is ridiculous. Ridiculous. Whoever would do that to a kid, I don't know. Bring them in, we wiggle the bones back in, have the mom do some dietary changes. They come around really well. And I think that being said, consider this. Kids are not 100% of our population, but they're 100% of our future. And with our drug-oriented culture, we have to do something different. If you want to have a war on drugs, then you need to broaden the target, because at least 52% of drug-related deaths in our country are prescription drugs. And there was a commercial that was out for a while where the kid was sitting on his bed and he had his headphones on and he was listening to music, and the dad walks in and he whips open a cigar box and it's got pot and paraphernalia in it, and the mother's standing behind the dad blubbering, and the dad sticks it in the kid's face and screams at him, "Your mother found this in your closet. Who taught you about drugs?" What did the kid say?
You did.
You did. Exactly. I learned it by watching you. I've been at this long enough now where I have multi-generations, where little children that I've started at birth are now bringing me their kids, right? And you know, if I have kids that use me for their health care, they don't get involved in drugs. They just don't. They don't smoke pot. They just don't. And they just have a different reverence for how their body works. They're not at home watching mom swallow something for every little thing that doesn't go right. It's a really different world. Kids need to know this because it's out of control. The United States ranks in the bottom 25% of industrialized nations for adult mortality. For all of our technology, all of our great ways of doing things, our seniors die faster than 75% of the other industrialized nations. Because we're drugging them to death. When I first started practicing, every once in a while, like an older lady would come in and she would unfurl this banner that had all these drugs that she was taking on it. Like, there'd be 12 drugs on there, and 8 would be for the side effect of the first 4. I mean, it was just like horrifying. We're like, oh my gosh. And we'd call each other in staff and say, oh my gosh, did you see this? Do you know that's all the time now? These seniors come in all the time with banners. They can't even remember what they're taking, so they hand me a big chart. It's unbelievable. It's all the time now. It's terrible. We just have to do something different because it's just, we're sicker people now. We're not sicker prior to the drugs, but now we're drugging them for everything. I love the new one, shift work disorder. You love that? You work 3rd shift and you're tired, we get a drug for you now. Why don't you just go to bed? You know, it's okay. Now, your entire family should be checked if what I said makes sense. Because which life isn't worth the trouble? Not, 2-year-old Mary Alice is fine, get her in. 89-year-old grandma who might die tomorrow, get her in. They deserve to have a better today. Nerve interference causes parts to weaken or die regardless of nutrition or physical exercise. It is hard to be healthy without some adequate nutrition and some halfway decent physical exercise. But you're kidding yourself if you think that's all it takes, because we see tons of examples of top athletes, clutching their chest, and, they have the best. They have the best of everything, and their bodies just can't work from the inside out. Life runs a show, guys, from above down and from the inside out, no other way. You should be in awe. You should be in awe of what your body has done, what you put it through, and it still keeps on ticking. I mean, that deserves our awe. Somebody asked the Columbia University computer, how large would a computer have to be to adequately run the human body when one the size of a podium runs the space shuttle? And they said, it said this: you would have to build a computer as tall as the Empire State Building and the diameter of the state of Texas to do what our bodies casually and gracefully do. Each one of us would have to have one like that. It would be very crowded. Can you imagine? I mean, that deserves our dearest respect, right? Dearest respect. So just remember that. Above down, from the inside out. Now, on to the nasty subject of fees. Can you afford to get sick? We can afford to die. You know how expensive? It's not a pine box and a hole in the ground. We have to have funeral insurance now, it's so expensive. This is how out of control we are. I'll tell you what our system's not. This is not a tax-supported free clinic, nor is this a pay what you want. Because we'd love to have our favorite car in the market for whatever we wanted to pay for it. And wouldn't that be great if it worked like that? But it doesn't. So I'll tell you what our system is. My husband and I designed this fee system so that you can practice what we preach. And what it is we expect you to do the best you can financially. If you are in a position to pay full fees, I expect you to pay them because you're getting a full service. If you cannot afford to pay full fees, please pay as close to them as you honestly can afford to pay. The reason we set it up this way is so that you can be here when I tell you to be here. You can get your family in here. And I don't want you hitting and missing on your program because you're not doing your best and you don't feel good about it. It's just silly. It just doesn't work for anybody. So just do the very best you can. It wasn't designed so that you can shop at a bargain basement chiropractor. It was designed because my husband and I have a real commitment to people's lives being enhanced with better health. With better health. And we're gonna figure out how to get your family in here. If you need to be here 3 days a week, we're gonna figure out how to make it affordable for you. We're gonna do everything we can to try and make that happen. Because life runs a show from above down and from the inside out. So please get in and get others in. All of this is possible if we all do our best. I tell you what, every time I'm in those rooms, I'll give you my best shot. If you will give me your best shot out here, we will naturally do a whole lot better. Because our dedication is to life. Okay? So I've just spent about 50 minutes telling you what I want to hear. I'll give you guys 2 minutes for questions. Do you have any questions? Anything? Make sense? Make sense? Is it what you thought I was going to say? Different? Pretty close? Good. All right. Before I let you go, let me say one more quick thing, and that is that if what I said makes sense, then there's one price that I expect you to pay, and it's a very simple one. Please tell others. You don't even have to mention my name. Just please tell others what you learned here tonight. Somebody, a friend of mine was practicing and a patient came up to him and said, you know, somebody should tell people about chiropractic because I was in the grocery store and this lady was dragging her leg worse than I did. So he says, well, did you say something to her? And she says, well, I couldn't talk to a complete stranger about her health. And he says, well, how would you like it if we were on a cruise ship and you fell over? And I said, well, I sure wish I met you before you fell in. You know, maybe I'd help. But you don't have to know somebody to help save their life, and in some cases it may be what you're doing. It used to be that when I first started practicing, I would tell people, well, for every 5 people that you tell, probably 4 will tell you I'm a quack, and you're nuts for listening to me. But that's not the statistic anymore. It is very easy to talk to people about chiropractic. People are receptive now. I used to go to the grocery store and I would give the clerk my check, which said Jan Ormsby, DC. And she would inevitably say, oh, what does that DC stand for? And I'd say, well, I'm a chiropractor. And they would go, oh, okay, and go right back to scan it out, you know, like you people. I never get that anymore. Anytime anybody asks me what I do and I tell them I'm a chiropractor, they ask me all kinds of questions. They want to know if I give them an adjustment on this bale of hay. And I mean, it's so positive anymore. Please tell people about chiropractic because folks are lining up at the doctor's offices, getting drugs, learning how to die more comfortably, thinking they're doing the only thing and even the best thing that they can do. And there's far better ways of returning yourself back to health. So if you know of somebody that you want me to check or look into, please just talk to Chris. She's around here somewhere. She'll help you with your scheduling. She'll get them in. We'll take a look. They can come and sit through my talk. I won't hassle them. Or just tell them to go see any chiropractor because any adjustment in the world is better than none at all. Just tell others what you heard here tonight. Other than that, you guys were awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see most of you tomorrow or next week. Thank you. Good night.
Hey, doctor.
Excellent. Does anybody want some cookies or juice or anything before they go?
I can.
Oh, I was gonna say, if you can take it with you for somebody else too, feel free. That's what they're there for. Excellent.